Welcome to episode 135 of Radio 815, the podcast dedicated to examining the work of writer-director J.J. Abrams, as well as his greater Bad Robot universe. I'm your host for this week. My name is Marcelo Inostroza, joined as always by my fellow co-host, Matt Crandall. And on today's show, we'll be talking about the 2001 film Joyride, written by Clay Tarver and our very own J.J. Abrams. So, Matt, a storm is coming and the rain will wash everything away.
It will, and hopefully while it's raining and washing everything away, you don't get on a CB radio and decide to pull a petty prank on a mean old truck driver. So this movie came out in 2001, but they actually started making it in 1999, and this is the first Bad Robot production. So this movie was produced by Bad Robot. Bad Robot didn't exist in its form before this feature film. So this is their first feature film, and it was a script that JJ and, as you said, Clay Tarver had written that was called Squelch, which I don't know why you would name a script that, but that was like the working title. And it just so happened that they kept having to do reshoots and they kept doing test screenings that it took a long time to actually get to the screen in 2001. And it's funny because it ended up coming out, basically Fast and Furious is 2001. And that's where Paul Walker, who had a few, hits or whatever, really started to shoot up in his fame after Fast and Furious. So this movie came out just a couple of months after. And so they thought it was great timing. But this is a movie that cost $20 million and I think worldwide made about 30. So not exactly a hit, but it did end up spawning a bunch of direct-to-video sequels. And it is kind of funny that the main antagonist of this movie being a voice on a CB radio played by Ted Levine, who was Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs, but he was also in Fast and Furious with Paul Walker as his police chief who's in charge of the undercover agents. So Paul Walker and Ted Levine, even though they don't share any screen time in Joyride, were in two technically car-themed movies in the later half of 2001 together, which is kind of a weird twist of fate that this movie took so long to come out. But being the first Bad Robot film production and having JJ's name on it as both producer and screenwriter makes it a pretty important piece of history, because obviously this is it's far away from Gone Fishing and Taking Care of Business. It is more genre. It is a thriller. It is a horror kind of movie. It doesn't have any of the sci-fi flair that almost all of JJ's movies going forward would tackle, because almost everything except for the odd rom-com that Bad Robot produces does have a much higher sci-fi tinged concept, whereas Joyride is all earthbound, even if Rusty Nail feels a little bit supernatural in his essence. Marcelo, what did you think of this two brothers on a road trip get into a heap of trouble with a serious psychopath?
Well, first of all, I really am surprised that this film Joyride was the very, very first Bad Robot production, because it was my understanding that Bad Robot really came into prominence with Alias. Like that's the first time that I saw the famous end credit sequence. The Bad Robot that we all love.
Alias was the Bad Robot show, and Alias was 2001 after this had already been made.
But the thing that I love about this movie so much is I love the character of Lewis and Fuller, because I really think that their dynamic is great, especially when Lewis decides to go halfway across the country to go and pick up a girl that he has a crush on, Veta, I believe her name is. And on the way there, his mother calls him, and his mother says that his older brother Fuller has gotten in trouble again. He's been arrested. So Paul Walker, on the way to go and see about a girl, picks up his brother, and after that, the character interactions between Lewis and Fuller are just wonderful. I really got that familial bond between the two of them. But I will say that the character of Fuller kind of really pissed me off because I viewed him as an immature ass. And I'm like, none of this shit would have happened if you didn't come up with this stupid idea to prank this guy. And the other thing that I really, really noticed while I was watching this movie is heavily inspired by Steven Spielberg's Duel. I really, really, really got those vibes, especially when Fuller and Lewis were being chased by the truck, and and all the paranoia that they went through during the movie. I really feel that the director of this film, who is escaping my mind at the moment, did a great job of building tension and making the audience feel like our two main characters in this story are going to die because of the stupid thing that they did. Which is teasing a trucker pretending to be a woman.
JJ grounds the movie at the start because we see a guy who wants to go on a road trip because he likes a girl, which is very relatable. But then also we give him the fuck up brother. That is also super relatable for a lot of people, where you've got that family member who is always kind of, you love them, but like they're always a nuisance to you. And I think the casting of Steve Zahn, at this time, Steve Zahn was mostly known for like wacky comedies. Since this movie, he's done a ton of drama and certainly been really instrumental in a lot of key movies and has a great part in one of the Planet of the Apes series. But I just love that this guy, we get it. Like, he's a fuck up, but he's kind of like the lovable fuck up. And when he gets on that CB radio and starts screwing around, we know nothing but trouble is going to come of this, but it seems at the time like a harmless prank. Like, who would it be hurting? And of course, if you don't think of the consequences and how that trucker would feel, it is just mean bullying that goes awry. And so I like that it's very simple. And as you said, there are a lot of shades of Steven Spielberg's Duel. And if you want to have a great trucker-themed movie marathon, you throw on Duel, you follow it up with Kurt Russell in Breakdown, and you finish the night with Joyride. Those are three movies about fucked up truckers that really, owe a lot to each other, but it is one of those concepts that just works. Like, someone, even if they're faceless, driving this big rig that is so imposing and powerful that, even when you're on the highway, if you're driving and you're near like a big truck, anything could happen at any moment. It could blow a tire, could jackknife. Now, what if the psychopath was behind the wheel? It becomes even crazier. So I love that these movies are like, any sort of slight that you do in passing to a stranger that you just think like, oh, nobody will get that mad about this. This takes road rage to like the next level. And so I thought that was fascinating. The movie is well directed by John Dahl, who he directed the movie Rounders with Matt Damon and Edward Norton about poker a few years before this. And he only did a couple of movies after this. He's mostly lived in TV, working on like a million shows, Outlander, Justified, unfortunately for him, Iron Fist, but also For All Mankind and Billions and Yellowstone. So like, this guy has a great career, but now he's mostly a TV dude. Same with the guy who co-wrote this movie with JJ. He only went on to do like a lot of stuff like Silicon Valley, and for some reason he wrote the movies that are on Disney Plus, or I guess Hulu in the States, Vacation Friends and Vacation Friends 2, which is John Cena and Lil Rel going on vacation, and John Cena's kind of like a crazy psycho, and they have these wild adventures, but they're like goofy comedies. So a lot of people after this movie didn't keep making this kind of movie, which is kind of interesting. But I like that after the harmless prank that they think is harmless, this movie immediately takes a turn when the brothers are in a hotel and they see that the guy that they were on the radio to, pretending to be a woman named Candy Cane, who wanted to get fucked by this dude Rusty Nail in a hotel with a bottle of pink champagne. They watch as the truck pulls up to the motel, and they hear the knocking on the door because this guy thinks he's got a sure thing lined up. And they're kind of laughing, what an idiot. He actually showed up. He thought that this woman was going to meet him. But then in the morning, they find out that the person who was actually in that room is now in a coma because the trucker just beat the living hell out of them. Not only beat the living hell out of them, because as we see in a very gruesome scene, they go to the hospital, ripped the entire bottom jaw of this dude off. And now the brothers realize they are in it over their heads. What are you thinking as things really escalate pretty quickly after that point?
That was actually one of my favorite scenes of the film when, Lewis and Fuller convinced this trucker to go to a hotel to meet up and to do the do. But when this guy shows up at, to the motel, he goes into the opposite room to where Lois and Fuller are. And the reason why Fuller invited him to the room next to theirs is because when they arrived at the motel, there was this customer there that was being unruly to the guy who runs the hotel. So Fuller wanted to get revenge on this nasty old curmudgeonly guy that was being nasty to the clerk guy who was running the hotel. But I absolutely love when Rusty Nail pulls up to the hotel that that Fuller and Lewis put their ear up to the wall, and it's like you can kind of hear very, very faint noises, but you can't really hear that much. So you're wondering, am I deaf or am I hearing things? I love it when Lewis calls the front desk, and the front desk makes a call in the next room, and then the front desk discovers, oh, there's nothing wrong. I can hear the TV. Everything is fine. And then the next morning, everything, everything goes to shit when the cop shows up and he says, last night this happened here. And like you said, when the cop takes Fuller and Louise to see the guy in the hospital, it's great because Rusty Nail, as you said, took off this guy's jaw, and I'm like, oh my God, this guy is a psychopath, and I love him. Because again, this movie is great because of what the character of Fuller does. Because like Matt said, you know exactly what's going to happen after Fuller started fucking with this guy, and I just couldn't wait for all sorts of hell to come down on Fuller and Lois. I wanted them to get out of it, of course, but I wanted them to sort of suffer for their poor choice in judgment. More so Fuller than Lois, because I kind of really like Paul Walker as a performer. I still miss him. So yeah, and I do want to mention just one more thing. I love the reliance on red in several instances in this film. I think the director does a great job of that, and every time he uses it, I think it's a very, very striking visual when he has his characters, engulfed in red in certain scenes in this movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of mood lighting, and certainly the red of brake lights and off the dashboard and stuff is really well done. And as you said, we like Lewis, so we feel bad that his brother has gotten him into this mess. And, this whole thing of be careful how you treat strangers. As you said, the guest who was rude to the guy at the hotel desk gets his. And it's all these casual things that should just be like, they're a slight, but we don't think that it's going to have deep ramifications. And in this movie, they all seem to have huge implications going forward. But I like that as the brothers see the carnage of the guy in a coma, Fuller just wants to get out of there and still deny that they've done anything wrong. But Lewis decides, like, we got to come clean. And so we see them meeting with a sheriff after Lewis has presumably explained everything that happened. And it's Jim Beaver from Deadwood and Supernatural, Bobby Singer, doing his best Gene Hackman impression, where he's like, you fucking kids, you did this shit and then all this crap now landed on my desk and I got a stack of paperwork. And I loved that scene. The scene where Fuller is kind of put out. He's like, can't believe my dumbass brother felt he needed to tell them. Now we're going to get fucked. I just got out of jail and now I might be going back. Like, I can't believe this guy. And Lewis, Paul Walker, is like, doing the right thing. And so I thought that was really dynamic. And, Jim Beaver is just great, but seeing him as the put out small town sheriff who's like, I can't believe these friggin' idiots did this and now I got a stack of paperwork was great. And then they decide to go on their way because they think, obviously Rusty Nail's not going to track them down. But of course, as they are driving out of this town at night over the CB radio once again comes that ominous, perfect voice, Candy Cane, are you there, Candy Cane? And Fuller can't help himself. So Lewis is like, let's not do anything. And Fuller is like, hey, psycho, we saw what you did. And he antagonizes him again because they end up telling him the truth. I was a guy, we were tricking you, and we saw what you did to that other guy, you psycho. And then we get the awesome moment where Rusty Nail is like, you better get that fixed. And they're like, what? And he's like, your broken tail light. And it's like one of those, oh shit, he can see the car moments. And so I love that because it's very tense. And then the brothers have a freak out where they stop at a gas station and a big ice truck pulls up and they see this hulking man with a big bat thing and they start to freak out. And then we get like a chase and a misdirect where this chase was just to give them back their forgotten credit card. But of course, when we have a psych out like that, we know that that can't be the end of it. And then all of a sudden the real Rusty Nail does come barreling out of the darkness in his gigantic transport. What are you thinking as the brothers come clean, but make things worse because they didn't realize Rusty Nail could actually see their car and was very close nearby?
Look, as much as I love this movie, guys, and I love this movie, I really, really do. I think it's tremendously well written, tremendously well acted. It's great. I love it. I'm gonna go buy it on digital. I love it so much. The one thing that I really found sort of implausible is how Rusty Nail kept finding Lewis and kept finding Fuller after Fuller got rid of the radio after that whole ordeal that Matt just described of them running from a truck that they thought was Rusty Nail, but turned out to be a guy just driving an ice truck. So that is my only issue with the movie. I can't seem to rationalize how this guy was constantly able to find these two after they dumped their CB radio on the road. Now, listen. I think as an audience member, that's where JJ and his co-writer asked me to do the leap to just let it go, so the rest of the movie can work. Which I did eventually, but I really love Fuller's sort of. I love and I hate Fuller's sort of cowboy approach of insulting this guy to the point of like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? If you think that this is going to have no consequences, you're ridiculous. And the point where he says, like Matt just said, the point where he goes, oh, you should really get those headlights checked out. I'm like, oh my God, you're going to get it now. I was going crazy. I absolutely loved it. It was so tense. It was so good. And I love the way that the director uses light from the truck, because the truck has the two front lights and it has a floodlight above the driver's cab, which I really, really like. So wherever they found this truck, it's a great truck.
Yeah, they film it in such a way that it feels like a monster. And it is kind of the way that Rusty Nail shows up all the time is sort of supernatural and like a monster movie where we just kind of go with it. But I love that, when they are in the car before he says the taillight line, Rusty Nail gives them the chance to apologize after they've come clean. And he says, apologize. And Fuller can't. And he says, no, listen, you sick freak show motherfucker, you lonely fuck or whatever. And makes it worse that then when they get attacked after the fake out with the ice truck driver and the MasterCard, they're getting just totally wrecked in their car. And they're like, stop, please stop. We're sorry. And Rusty Nail just says, yeah, I was just playing, and backs away and drives off. And so they think everything is over. They think, all right, he scared the shit out of us. He was just playing. Hopefully that's done. So then they meet up with Lily Sobieski's Venna, and we kind of get like the hints of maybe a love triangle that's about to go down because of a really creepy scene where we know that Paul Walker loves this girl, and Paul Walker and Steve Zahn are in a hotel room together, and Paul Walker is asleep. And Fuller goes, "Hey man, if you got a problem with me trying to shoot my shot with Venna, just say so. And if you don't say anything, then I'm gonna assume it's fine." And his brother's clearly asleep, and he's like, "Okay, oh, it's cool. All right, great." And so then, Steve Zahn tries to pull something off here. It doesn't work, but then shortly thereafter is where they do get a phone call in the hotel room from Rusty Nail, and they realize dude is still out there. This isn't over.
Yeah, I absolutely hated when Fuller started hitting on Veta after they drunk who knows how many tequila shooters at the bar, because I'm like, dude, you obviously know that your younger brother has it out for this girl. What kind of a fucking dick do you have to be to hit on the girl that your brother is interested in? But in that same note, Veta didn't say no when when he brought over his own mixers to do some more drinking. And I go, what the? So I kind of had an issue with the way that JJ and his co-writer wrote that whole thing, because number one, I wanted a little loyalty from Veta that I didn't get, and I was like, maybe at that point, I wondered to myself, maybe I'm asking a little bit too much of this film, or maybe I'm expecting a little bit too much from JJ and his co-writer. What do you think about that? Do you think I'm just expecting too much?
Well, I think on the page it's written in a way that she is not like, "Hey, I'm with your brother," because they are not together. But I think the way
Right,
that
that's right.
that Sobieski plays it is kind of like, at first she's put out like, is this guy a creep? Is this something weird? But I think she thinks, oh, he's the brother of the guy I like. This is going to be harmless. This is not going to result in something further. But it's tough to tell because this isn't a movie that takes a huge amount of time on the characters. Most of it, from the point that we're at now, is the forward momentum of the action and the tension built by that villain just showing up whenever we least expect it. So I think it makes us like Steve Zahn even less, and we kind of already didn't like his character at this point of the film. So it was an interesting choice because you're doubling down. Now, I do know that there were versions of this movie that had alternate endings where like one of the brothers died. So I think maybe they are trying to make it that we wouldn't be that sad that happens as this goes on. And the way that, they put Venna in danger later, I think there were alternate endings where that also went bad, and it was like a real downer where like everyone is basically dead. And there were multiple endings where Rusty Nail survived, and then ones where he died, and they obviously decided to go with the open-ended in case we want to do a sequel version. But yeah, this is not, characters on the page are not super well defined, but I think the actors do bring something to it that makes it a little bit more. But I believe that, when JJ and Tarver are writing this, they're mostly just thinking about the intensity of the scenes, and this makes us uncomfortable so that then when Rusty Nail shows up, shortly thereafter, we're kind of, not that we want to see these guys get more of their comeuppance, but we kind of don't mind to see Steve Zahn go through it a little bit because he's been such a dirtbag that, when Rusty Nail pulls this prank where if you guys don't go into this diner bare ass naked, I'm going to come after you again, is really funny. And we kind of feel like Fuller deserves it. So I think that's part of, because of that scene earlier with Venna. Now, Lewis has at every turn done the right thing, and he's still involved in this. But I think that's probably why they kept that going. But I also think there was more of this love triangle that ended up hitting the cutting room floor, because at this point the movie is just interested in action, tension, and there was more of that in the script, where apparently they filmed a few love scenes and stuff, and it's like, when would we have time for that? I don't understand where that would have been. So I think they were wise to cut those out.
Would you agree though, as little definition that we have on these characters, would you agree that you see JJ's DNA in these characters?
Yeah, 100%. Because, the guy who's the stand-up guy and the screw-up and the girl that he's driving across country for definitely has shades of all of those hallmarks that would show up in things like Felicity, Alias, and what have you, where we get a lot of those same dynamics in different characters.
I really love the third act of this film where Rusty Nail basically kidnaps Veta after this amazing sequence in a cornfield, and he says to Lewis and he says to Fuller, if you want to save Veta, you have to come to this hotel and you have to go to this room number, and you have to bring me a bottle of wine if you want this to end. And I absolutely love that Rusty Nail ends up tying Veta to a chair, aka Alias. JJ has a thing with chairs. I don't know. I loved that entire sequence because I kept thinking for some reason or another that these two guys were going to open the door and she was going to get her head taken off. But I'm like, this is a JJ movie. He would never do that. The one thing that JJ has never done as a writer, I believe, he has never gone for this sad ending. In things that he writes, for the most part, our heroes end up alive and our bad guys or our villains get what they deserve. He has never gone the other way. The only film that he has gone the other way is the film that he didn't write within Cloverfield. I mean, not to steer the conversation in a different path, but what do you think about that sort of approach to the way that JJ writes his scripts?
Well, I think a lot of his movies generally have an optimistic view of life and not like a dark, pessimistic one. So even when there is adversity, there's always some sort of hope. There's a new hope on the horizon somehow. But so I do think that it would have been very uncharacteristic of the kind of things that Bad Robot does to have something super dark happen where, they didn't get there in time and Vena got her head blown off. Or if Vena's roommate, Charlotte, had been murdered viciously and disemboweled or something. So I think this was also, even though that hotel room scenario with the shotgun is very Saw-esque, this was before Saw. So I think that if this movie had actually been made 5 years later, it probably would have been way darker and would have been a little bit more fucked up. But this was still produced at a time where it was not, the era of torture porn thrillers where we had those fucked up things. And I also don't think that JJ would have been interested in that. But as you said, we get this, the guys do the naked thing. You want fries with that is a really funny line. And they're doing this because Vena's roommate has been taken by Rusty Nail. And then they go to the cornfield, which has shades of, whenever there's a cornfield in a movie, you always think of North by Northwest, the Hitchcock movie. And then from there, Vena gets taken and they realize, when they're going to meet him with the pink champagne at the motel, that like shit ain't right. And I do think it is really messed up that if they just go in there and open the door, she is going to die. And luckily that's not what happens. The brothers figure out what's up and it's very tense as we're seeing that door handle about to be turned and you're wondering, is this going to be a really gruesome end? But it's tense. And I think that's the number one thing, is that this movie just always goes for the tension and the thrill rather than the logical or the character. It's always just about the audience experience, which is what makes it fun to rewatch and to really get involved in, because all that stuff works. Check your brain at the door a little bit, but in terms of just being a machine that ramps up tension, it absolutely is. And it's surprising to me that this works so well, and yet JJ hasn't really gone back to the thriller. He makes these movies that have sequences that are tense, certainly like a Mission Impossible has action scenes that are very intense, but not this kind of tension machine thriller. And I'm surprised that he hasn't felt the need to try his hand at that again. Maybe it's because he felt they did it so well. You don't want to go back to that. And he's been given a broader canvas with the more money that he's had, that you can do more fantastical special effects driven fare. Do you think he would ever go back to doing something small? Now, I know Bad Robot did produce a movie for Netflix with Allison Janney that was trying to be a tension thriller, kind of in this vein. I didn't think it worked, but I know you liked that movie more than I did.
Yeah, the movie that Bad Robot made for Netflix, starring C.J. Craig herself, Allison Janney. For me, it worked. But to answer your question, if I think J.J. will go back to the smaller sort of fare and do movies like Joyride, I would really like him to, because I think that J.J. personally, I think that J.J. made one of the worst decisions of his career when he went back to a galaxy far, far away. And I think that movie, just to go off on a little tangent here, sort of hurt his confidence, because we haven't seen him do a movie in how long, Matt?
Yeah, it's now 4 years post Rise of Skywalker. So it has been a while, and that movie, I couldn't remember the name, but it was called Lou, that he produced for Netflix. Not a memorable not a memorable title, nor for me a memorable movie. I'm sure one day we'll have to talk about it. But yeah, I don't know. Obviously the guy now is at a point in his career where he can decide to take 5 years off, and it's not going to affect his ability to get a movie greenlit. And Bad Robot is in a position where they can do other things that JJ doesn't have to write or direct, and they can still oversee it if David Zaslav will let them. But it's been a while, and I would love to see, I want to see, obviously, some sort of grand sweeping spectacle summer blockbuster, have the guy come back with like another Super 8, not a sequel to Super 8, but a movie in that vein, to just show everybody, I still got it, I can still do the thing. But I would also love to see a small movie, not necessarily a horror thriller, but something in this vein that's like 3 characters on the road, small intimate settings, but like a fairly decent high concept that drives it, that doesn't have to be $150 million tentpole thing, that can just be like a good old fashioned enjoyable movie.
JJ sort of found his lane in the creation of Felicity, because he created it with Matt Reeves, and I feel that during this movie he really didn't have his voice. We saw tinges of it, and we saw glimpses of it in this movie, but I really feel that JJ is really good at doing a sci-fi action movie, but he's also really good at doing tiny, intimate character setting films with emotional characters and good stories. And I kind of feel that doesn't fit within the thriller realm, because in most films, or in most thrillers, you sort of have to forego the character work to get to the exciting sequence, or to get to the twist, or what have you. And I don't think that you have enough time to do both, so you have to pick. And that's why I feel that JJ has not gone back to something like Joyride to tell a thriller kind of movie, or to tell a movie akin to, again, Steven Spielberg's Duel.
Yeah, and I think you kind of nailed it, that Bad Robot does so much TV that even if they were to do something in this lane, it would probably be a TV show. It probably wouldn't be a movie, just because very rarely are we making this type of movie anymore. You know, the horror genre is one of the only ones that has breakthrough low budget hits. But you know, I don't know that Bad Robot would be interested in doing that. They would probably do some sort of prestige drama that would fit more into this kind of mold. But I think for a decent thriller, JJ, you know, writing and producing this thing, did a good job, got his feet under him. Like I said, Bad Robot produced this movie. It came out right at the same time that Alias was finally hitting the air, which was the first show that they actually produced from the ground up. And it was interesting to see that they didn't revisit this well again, because there, like I said, there were lots of direct-to-video sequels, but Bad Robot wouldn't really do another movie until Cloverfield, which was multiple years later, because they were so TV-driven at the time. So the fact that JJ has now taken 4 years off from movies isn't unprecedented because there was almost 7 years between this and Cloverfield.
Wow. Speaking of JJ's future, before as we wrap up here, we do have that TV show Duster. So I do think that will be we do have that TV show Duster on the horizon whenever the stuff in Hollywood gets figured out. So I do believe in that series that it's a procedural that JJ will sort of come back to his roots a little bit and write some amazing episodes. I don't know if he's going to do any directing for the series, but I'm really looking forward to that because I really really want to see him start writing stuff again. Just for me personally, there is one more thing I would like to mention about Joyride before we say goodbye for this episode. I love the score by Marcos Beltrami, the guy who did the score for Scream. He did an amazing job with the score. The score adds so much to these tension filled scenes that JJ and his co-writer constructed. I think this score is awesome. It's the first score of his that I actually like because I don't like his job on the Scream films, which a lot of people think I'm crazy for, and you probably do too.
I wouldn't say crazy, but I dig the work on Scream. But the soundtrack is a big part of this movie to drive that tension.
With that, that'll do it for this edition of Radio 815. Listen, guys, if you like the show and you want to send us questions, comments, or what have you, you can send us an email at radio815@aol.com, or you can follow us on X at JJUniverse815. You can send us comments, questions, or whatever the hell you want on there. Or if you prefer to listen to the show on YouTube, you can follow us and listen to back episodes of our wonderful show at youtube.com/radio815. But if you want to talk to me about anything at all, you can find me and talk to me on X. I'm at CrickFanatic88. But Matt, if the good folks at home want to talk to you about anything at all, what will be the best place for them to get to you at?
I refuse to call it X, so the best place is on Twitter at Matt Crandall.
All right, guys. And Matt, can you enlighten the good folks if they're going to come back next week? What we possibly could we talk about next week?
So, as we alluded to earlier, the next Bad Robot movie that they did was 7 years after this. It was Matt Reeves' Cloverfield. So we will talk about Cloverfield next week as we continue looking at some of these Bad Robot films.
All right, guys. So with that, for my co-host, Matt Crandall, I will simply say thank you for listening. And as always, we'll talk back soon.
Radio 815 is a Balloonhead Productions presentation in association with Killer Newt Productions.